Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cyber Revolution podcast. Thanks for joining us yet again. I'm Adam Hewitt, the CEO of Cyber Revolution, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. This is one not to miss, guys. Dr. James Stanger, the Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA.
Hey,
James, how you going?
doing great, man. Doing great. It's good to be here, Adam. It's really good to be.
Yeah, really good. Really excited to have you on. Now, not that all of our guests aren't special, but by far and above, James, you are the most established, most experienced cybersecurity professional that we've had on the podcast over the past 2 years. James is an award-winning author, blogger, and educator, and has consulted to corporate and government leaders worldwide about cybersecurity and emerging technologies over the last 25 years. Okay, so this episode has actually been about a year in the making. I remember I first spoke to your colleague, Peter, and he mentioned that I should have you on the Cyber
Yeah,
Revolution podcast. And then we actually met face to face for the first time back in March this year at
that's
CyberCon in Canberra.
which was cool.
Are you going to be coming to the CyberCon in Melbourne in later October this year?
That's right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So I'll be seeing you there, I think, right?
We'll see you there again. Amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone, before we get into the good stuff, I just want to give a bit of an overview of who this podcast is for. Basically, it's for anyone that is interested in this amazing field called cybersecurity. You might have just heard about it. You might have always loved it. You might have just been hacked and you want to know a little bit more about how you can protect yourself. Or you could be looking to make the career change into cybersecurity and have absolutely no idea where to start. So this podcast is to break down, I guess, some common misconceptions and really just educate people on what cybersecurity is and how you can land your first job in this industry. So if that resonates, then this is the podcast for you. All right, James, let's get into it.
Cool.
I want to start where I do with all of my guests, and that is their journey into cybersecurity. Now, you've done a lot over the past 25 years, as I said before, from a consultant all the way through to a presenter, a program designer, curriculum designer. Let's start from the beginning. How did you get into it? I guess before even talking about how you got into it, why did you get into cybersecurity? What was it that captured your attention?
I think what really is cool about cybersecurity is how should I say this, fly by the seat of your pants nature of it. You got to learn stuff all the time, and it's really fun. I also love the idea of problem solving and the idea of looking behind things. It's like we all know how the car drives down the road. I think a lot of us can drive, things like that. But it's really fun getting underneath the hood of things. And with cybersecurity, even more somehow than IT, it gets underneath the hood of things from a business perspective and also from a technical perspective. It's really fun to break down barriers and things like that.
It's amazing. I think the number one trait that I've seen with all of our students and people that I speak to and people that love cybersecurity, it's curiosity.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is. I remember one time I was getting started in it, and a friend of mine, he's just like, James, it's funny. You just ask the darndest questions. You have no problem looking dumb by asking a question or whatever. And I guess I have no ego in that. It's fun to learn stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
Amazing.
I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and recently, and then I was in Jakarta, of all places, Indonesia, recently, and CIOs from both those places, from the US to Jakarta, they said the number one skill they looked for in a IT and a cybersecurity person was curiosity, Adam. It's interesting to bring that up.
Yeah, seems to be a common trait. And so tell us a bit more about that. How did you actually get into it? So started as a cyber consultant, if I'm correct?
The first thing I did was I started as kind of a help desk person to my professors. My professors were always having problems. One day, I had a paper that wouldn't print out. This is a long time ago. This is long before notebook computers, okay? And I literally trundled my computer, this big bulky thing, which he didn't walk around with, because I knew my professor would not believe that I didn't have my paper ready. This is for an English class. I got a PhD, believe it or not, in what I call unemployment, a PhD in British Romantic literature. Anyway, long story longer, I did two things. One, the professor's like, oh, this guy uses computers. And two, I had to learn how to fix my computer so that didn't happen again. And so I started learning about what goes on underneath the hood, as it were, of computers. And then I got a job in 1992 working as a grad student, working on the internet on databases. Now think about that. 1992, that's before Windows 95, when people started using, those things called modems and all that. My point is, I started kind of early learning this stuff on the fly, and I just kept asking questions. And I went from a kind of a data entry person into somebody that worked on the databases. Fast forward a bit, I was working as a technical editor and a writer for a company that did certifications back in the early 2000s, late 90s. And a guy named Tim Crothers showed up and they said, James, you need to give up the next 2 weekends and a couple of weeks. And we need you to write a course. It's a really good security course, but it's in this guy, Tim Crothers' head, and you need to get it onto paper. And that's another way that I got into cybersecurity because I already had done a dissertation fellowship. And during that fellowship, I became the help desk person. And then I had to answer a bunch of security questions. And so when this guy named Tim Crothers showed up and I helped him write that course or write it down anyway, that started quite a relationship with various leaders. To this day, Tim is now the head person at Google who protects all of their retail presence, if that makes sense.
Wow.
So he was in charge of threat hunting over there and he moved over to that. I should have followed him. But anyway, that's a long story. And it's kind of a convoluted story, I know, but that's how I got started. I was in the academic side of things and just my curiosity kept leading me to security. And I kind of turned my curiosity into a career, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the dream, isn't it? And I guess you've seen it now over the past 25 years develop so much, and I guess even probably more so over the past. When have you felt that it's really gone to another level, like the cybersecurity and education side of things? Because it definitely has.
It kind of wintered in a sense. Security was a real big thing around 2000, 2002 and all that. And then various downturns and things like that. I think it really started taking off about 2008. I mean, obviously it was around a long time before then. But it seemed to me that after the last economic downturn, the 2006, 2008 thing, that's when it just really kicked into majorly high gear. Seems to me.
And so now you're the Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA. I love that title. Now, most of our students will know who CompTIA are, but for those who don't, can you please explain firstly who CompTIA are and obviously what your role entails there?
You bet. We're an industry association. And so we work with industry leaders from around the world. And those companies could be companies as large as Dell or Ricoh, Apple, et cetera, or as small as what's called a managed service provider, an MSP. That means somebody who runs a company that supports other companies' tech. So you've heard of accountants before, dentists, insurance offices, for example. All those types of small offices, they don't have an IT department. They hire somebody in IT, right? They hire a company. So we're a member-driven organization. And some 30 years ago, they basically all gathered together. Back then, it was companies like Compaq, HP, IBM, Lexmark, others. And they all got together and said, we're wasting a ton of time on things such as help desk and things like that. And we need one company, one organization, a nonprofit to come in and do education for us. And so that's what we did. We started that with Help Desk. We've done it with Security Plus. We've done it with Network Plus. And now you could argue we're a member company, member nonprofit, but we're an education company. We do cutting edge work in certification and now in education and training, et cetera. It's a fun job to have.
It is. And that's where obviously the partnership with Cyber Revolution and CompTIA came. We're obviously an authorized CompTIA delivery partner and very familiar with, I guess, the other side of the organization and the members with the managed service providers, because they're typically our placement partners as well, these MSPs that secure other businesses' networks as well. So it works really well. Okay. And so like, what do you, I know that you mentioned before, it's your passion and it's you're obviously genuinely interested in it. What do you generally love about the cybersecurity industry?
Some of the things I love about the cybersecurity industry is, first of all, it allows me to ask lots of questions and kind of flex those curiosity muscles or whatever. I think the second thing is it really is kind of a mix of tech and how businesses do things. And by businesses, I don't just mean corporations. I mean how the government business works, for example. So I do a lot of work with governments. So I love having one leg in the education tech space. I love having one leg in the corporate space. In that way, to me, I think what it does is it's really fun with cybersecurity to not only protect people, right, and data and information and things, but it's also really fun with cybersecurity to see all the new tech and how that works. Whether it be AI, really cool automation, what people are calling zero trust, all those myriad, 6, 8, 12 technologies that work together to make that happen. So it's a really cool combination of the human factor and the tech for me.
I like what you said at the start. It's just forever changing. Like we always say, who cybersecurity is for, and obviously then who it isn't for.
Yeah.
Who it is for is someone who just genuinely loves lifelong learning,
Yeah.
developing each and every year, right?
Mhm.
And not everyone's like that. Some people like to, whether they want to upskill, do a degree, get into a job and have a comfortable role where they can just progress purely through tenure or whatever it might be. That's not who cybersecurity is for, obviously. It's for people
I
that
don't think so.
genuinely.
Yeah, and I think increasing with tech, Adam, it's tough to do that. AI is going to keep us on our toes. Automation has been
Yep.
keeping us on our toes. Lots of things have.
Yep. I guess, and so moving on to specifically more the cybersecurity education, we predominantly help people to land their first job in cybersecurity and their career changes. Often they come to us, or initially they'll think that potentially they don't have the capability to learn the skills required. That old school mindset of cybersecurity, you have to be a absolute expert and a genius to even look at getting into that field. I always say no one was born a cybersecurity expert. It's a skill, just like anything else. Everyone starts from the beginning. And what we equally say to them as well is there are transferable skills that you've built up
Big time.
over your previous
Yeah.
years in your previous roles. On that, we've kind of covered some of this stuff already, but
Mhm.
what do you think the best transferable skills are for cybersecurity?
Besides curiosity, I think another transferable skill is the ability to communicate. And for example, writing. I'm not necessarily in order, curiosity and then writing. But one reason why I was brought in, the first gig that I was offered, it was offered by a guy named, I think his name is Taher El Gamal. And El Gamal helped create one of the, you have to Google it. He's one of the early, I think, key exchange algorithms. I still have the signed letter of agreement. I didn't take that job. It was a job as a pen tester, though. I didn't take that
Okay.
particular job. First job. And the reason why they hired me, they said, James, you seem to know your stuff. You know how to hack into a secure shell or a low level secure shell, something with a low patch level. But James, all of us hate to write. They had people on this pen testing team. They were the princes and princesses of darkness. These people, they were incredible. There was one person. She'd forgotten more about databases than I think anybody at Oracle, would ever learn, or MySQL or whatever. There was a person who was. He said to me, he goes, "Well, I don't know a whole lot about the whole computer server thing, but I'm a physical security person." So he's a social engineer and a physical security person. So they were, and it was funny. The guy, another guy, kind of nudged me and said, "Don't let him lie to you like that." He used to run all the email administrator stuff for Yahoo, and he didn't know that much about computers. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you
these
should.
were amazing, but they all, to a person, really hated writing and giving presentations and things like that. So guess what? My job was to do, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of rounded that sort of thing out. Another, I think, portable or transferable skill is time management, for example. I think another transferable skill is the ability to think around the corners of problems, to anticipate. So that's
Mm.
part of curiosity, but I think it's also the skill to have some empathy with others and to think about not only empathy in terms of what that person's feeling, but also empathy for the situation. In IT, there's a saying that I like to use. I stole it from somebody from the Grateful Dead, if you've ever heard of them, the rock band. The situation is the boss sometimes when it comes to IT. And you have to have empathy for that situation, what's going on. You can't go in thinking in terms of theory. You have to be very practical. You have to be very grounded about it. And so those are some skills I think that are really important.
And take each situation seriously, right? I think what so a lot of people can go in a technical cybersecurity role as well. We speak to a lot of our students. It's tough, but you might be at the end of a long day. Potentially a fault alert comes in, and you're like, you know what? I've seen this before. It's just going to be another false alert. And I think that's probably, a really good saying to maybe pass on. And I'm going to steal that as well. That situation is the boss. Take it extremely seriously because it could be a
Yeah,
true alert.
and listen and listen carefully. The ability to listen and really think about things. And another thing that comes in when it comes to cybersecurity, people love the idea of stampeding into cybersecurity. What? Why wouldn't Adam, you and I want to stampede into a job that pays huge amounts of money? You have to start getting your network foundations. You have to start
Yes.
and if you don't have foundations in things in what I call the four pillars, a foundation a little bit in data and understanding databases, a foundation in, of course, cybersecurity, but also how IT works. Do you know
Yep.
do you really know how DNS works? What's the primary function of DNS? And what's the difference between that and reverse DNS and recursion, MAC addresses, et cetera, stuff like that. And then the last one I would say would be a little bit of coding. You don't have to be a developer, for gosh sakes. You don't have to have a computer science degree, but understanding a little bit about coding, all those things you will build on over the years.
Definitely helps. I think I'm not sure whether it's the same in the States, but in Australia, typically an entry level role will go into a technical role, like a SOC analyst, incident responder, or potentially a consulting role. There's lots of opportunity in the GRC consulting space. Is it similar over in the US?
Yes, it is. It's interesting to see folks who want to go the SOC analyst route. That's a great route to certainly start with. And you can even stay in that area and move on to a SOC analyst senior or a threat hunter.
Yeah.
But yes, GRC is one. I know a person, Elizabeth, I want to say Elizabeth Byerly is her name, lives in Atlanta. And she was a second grade teacher, elementary school teacher. And less than a year later, she had moved over to being a GRC compliance analyst. And my favorite thing I say about that I stole from her, she said there's very little difference between a group of second graders and a board, going into a board running a company or a group of C-level people. You've got to keep them on task. You've got to, carrot and stick them and things like that. That was great.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the two, right, have probably different characteristic traits that you want to look for. So the technical role, it's obviously all about problem solving, critical thinking, curiosity. Consulting is probably more so around that communication skills, relationship building. And so it's really different. And so for people listening, or we do this exercise a lot with our students, is think about what you have done in your previous roles, whether you're, a tradesman, whether you're a dentist, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a teacher, and what can you bring over that would suit you more in a technical role or a consulting role.
Tons of things. One of the things I brought over was a pretty good ability to do research. When I was telling you about that PhD in unemployment I got, one of the things that I was able to salvage from the wreckage of that previous effort was a pretty good researcher. In fact, I represent the research department at CompTIA. So, yeah.
Yep. Amazing. And so we briefly touched on some of those core skills. For our students, they go through their A+, Network Plus before they get to their Security Plus, because they have to have those foundational skills, your IT foundations, some network foundations. If we can have a quick chat around the CompTIA Security Plus, because that is the big popular certification when it comes to security. It's kind of like the baseline we see in a lot of the job descriptions here. If you want to touch on a little bit of that, like, I guess, how that was developed, what it's at now, and I guess some of the plans for the future.
You bet. The Security Plus is really cool. It basically has 5 domains, and each of those domains is an area of study. And just to give a high-level overview, any certification that CompTIA does, including Security Plus, is created by literally thousands of working IT professionals. So it's not just a smart person like Adam who walks in the room. It's a lot of Adams who walk in there, and these are all people who are working professionals. So what's really cool is as you download those objectives and take a look at them, and you learn things about, for example, threat identification, or to understand how you use encryption to ensure confidentiality, but also integrity. How you learn about industry backup, for example, to talk about availability, all these different kinds of elements. As you download those objectives, it's not just a few people's idea of what is right. It's literally thousands of people. So that's what's really cool about Security Plus. And that's why it kind of has become a de facto standard out there. I was recently talking to somebody in the United States National Security Agency, and she said, well, thank heavens for CompTIA, because with Security Plus, you get that baseline. And then that allows people to jump off into all sorts of really cool careers and other certs.
Exactly. And that's it. It's the basics, getting the basics. Well, once they typically then go into an organization, they can learn some micro credentials or specific tools that are specific to that role. It's a great, as you said, baseline.
One other thing is there's a program. This one happens to, again, be in the United States, but I've seen it adopted in Japan. I've seen it being adopted in Europe. It's called the 8140 Directive. 8140. It's just, they love numbers. Anyway, what was really cool, Security Plus was accepted under the 8140 program for 20 different job roles, and some of them very different, from database administrator, for example, to beginning security analyst, to GRC. So it's really cool to see that.
It is. It is. So moving on to the global issue that is cybersecurity, but obviously I'm being a little bit selfish here and wanting to talk just about Australia.
Hey, good.
we are, I'm interested to hear your point on this, because we are admittedly behind the rest of the world when it comes to our resilience as a country. The government has openly admitted this, that we're about 5 years behind the rest of the world. And in order to catch up, we need another 85,000 new professionals to enter the industry by 2030. That was the latest statistic that came out in, I think, around March 2024. The big question is, how can we bridge this skills gap quickly, but also do it the right way? What are your thoughts?
Great question. First of all, I think Australia is behind, United States is behind, UK is behind. I think a lot of us are behind. I don't think that the industry has gotten to the level of minimum viable level. I've heard that from more than one CIO and CISO. I'm lucky to talk to industry leaders. I was talking to one in Jakarta who works for AWS. In Europe, I was recently talking to people in the UK government. They were all a bunch of spies, frankly. And it was interesting. They're all saying the same thing. So it's good that you in Australia recognize that you're behind. It's good when I see people in the US and any other country realize they're behind. So your question though was how to get past that skill level.
Quickly, sorry, and just jump in there. Sorry, James.
Sure, man.
What do you mean by minimum viable level?
It's there's the concept of minimum viability. At what point do you have a collective skill level worldwide to where you can be viable, where you can do business in a secure way? And by business, I mean government, I mean military, I mean academic, I mean business enterprises. I don't think we're there yet. There are incredible organizations, some governments, some organizations, mostly in the banking industry, retail does pretty well, that frankly are at a minimum viable level where their everyday operations can get them in and out of trouble or out of trouble quicker than they got into it, right?
Yep.
That's what I mean by minimum viable level. But to be honest, there are a lot of corporations that aren't. Everybody wants to pick on CrowdStrike, and I'm not going to pick on CrowdStrike, right? There's this big issue that wasn't necessarily a cybersecurity issue, but certainly related. It was cybersecurity software that caused problems.
Yep.
Why did that happen? And everybody wants to point I saw one government leader wanted to point, a couple from various governments wanted to point the finger at developers. Well, it's the old saying, what if you point a finger at somebody, you got 3 or 4 pointing back at you, right? That's 3, right? Not much of a counter.
Yeah.
My point is, I was always taught about the internet that we are in a shared security or a shared model. In other words, it's your responsibility to come to the internet table ready to go. And same with me. And if you and I are not at a minimum viable level, it brings everybody down. And that's kind of what we saw here. And I think the issue is a set of issues where we are treating tech as, well, it came from a trusted source. We don't need to monitor anything that comes to us, right? So I'm going to blame everybody on this one. If you're accepting updates and you're not testing them first, then you're part of the problem. It's not just the person who gave you that bad update. We saw the same problem with SolarWinds before COVID, right? It's not the same problem, but a similar issue. First of all, organizations need to iterate their way into cybersecurity. That means to get people with the right skills, you need to understand your endpoints. And by endpoints, your mobile phone. It could be operational technology, the computers and the machines that keep water coming to your faucet or electricity through all that. So you need to understand your endpoints. You need to understand network protocols second, right? That's why the trifecta, A+ network plus security plus, is such a powerful pathway, because it gives everybody kind of that even level set grounding. I think, to your point, a skills-based approach where people are focusing less on, well, what curriculum does a person have to go through, and more on, well, what skills can that curriculum deliver quickly in a verifiable way. That will get us to a minimum level of viability, in my opinion. And that's why I love certification. I went from education where I could affect as a teacher, maybe 300-400 students a year, maybe 500 on the outside, to certification where, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people that we were able to get to that minimum level of viability.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I could probably talk about this for another 20 or 30 minutes. So we're going to have to move on. But I think, again, skills-based mixed along with mature-ready, professional-ready people going into the industry at an entry level, like people that have these transferable skills. All they need to know is the basic cybersecurity skills. And then the third pillar to it is industry. Industry needs to be open to hiring these people, giving them a shot and going, you know what, we may not get a return on our investment on this employee for the first 6 months, but they're really smart. They've got great values. They're a good fit for our organization, and they're going to be with us long term. That's, I feel
And
like, the three things that we
it's
need.
interesting you can bring that up because there's so many organizations that we at CompTIA, we tend to call it over-spec their job requests. You know what I mean? You ever seen that for entry level,
Yep.
and it's clearly written for a mid-level person or
Yep.
even senior. I once had a person
Yes.
who's an amazing cybersecurity expert, and he sent me an email saying, I don't think I would get this job. And the URL showed up and it was for an entry-level job. I think
Yeah.
it was a she. Actually, she said, they're asking for skills I don't have. It's fascinating to me. So
It is.
and so your
Ridiculous.
job as a person getting hired is to get past those spec, but to answer the following question. A friend of mine lives in Europe, and he basically said he spends up to about 50% of a new employer's time in the first 6 months, new employee's time, teaching some of these basic things about DNS or whatever. If you can find your way to say, hey, you don't have to take that risk with me. You'll get past those overspec job descriptions.
Yeah. And that's predominantly my role at Cyber Revolution now, is finding
Yeah.
more of those managed service providers that have that mindset, hiring over potential, not just current skill set and experience. It's really, really interesting. And there's more. The positive thing is there's more and more that are popping up each and every month as obviously the issue gets more severe. Moving on to a question around the CompTIA certification, specifically the exams.
Yeah.
I know this is more so for a question for our students that are currently studying with us that are listening in right now. What would be some study tips for them potentially to pass these certifications?
Every time you hear about some sort of weird theoretical thing, try to find a physical or practical way to implement it. When you hear about something like the TCP handshake, or when you hear about PKI, don't just go, okay, I understand TCP and PKI as acronyms. Make it happen. Download VirtualBox or VMware, right? You can do that for free. Download a couple of versions of Linux. You can download old versions of Windows. As long as you don't activate them, it's not illegal. And start playing around with it. That's my first advice. So practical, hands-on. Go to Hack the Box, or there's CompTIA Labs, for example, you can get involved in if you don't want to set all that stuff up yourself. But create a playground. There was one piece of advice.
Amazing. That is, practical. I mean, the way we structure our education as well is 50% theory, 50% then jump into the live labs and do it. That is 80% of the time is, retain 80% and more of the information once you've practically done
and
it.
Get people to ask questions too. Not only experienced, but even inexperienced people. So create a peer learning group, and that could be very experienced, mid-level, etc. Get a mentor. Second thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Great one. We're actually skipping ahead a little bit here as well, because lastly, I asked this question to all of the guests, and you've been in the industry now for so long, you've seen it all. What would be your top 3 tips for somebody that's currently thinking about getting into cybersecurity? Right, they might be a career changer, they might be a school teacher, and they're thinking, is it for me? Is it not for me? What would be your top 3 tips?
First of all, take stock in what you're interested in. In other words, kind of ask yourself, take a look at the different job roles that are out there. A couple of different ways you can do it. You can go to explore.comptia.org, for example, and you can start typing in, some of the things that you're interested in. So that's one of the first things. Take a look at what I call the horizon of expectations for all of IT. There's so many different gigs out there for you in cybersecurity or in various parts of IT. I think the second thing that you can do, as you're getting started is don't get discouraged about, oh my gosh, there's so much I have to learn. Iteration is key, not only in making IT work, but iteration in your own self, right? Iteration simply meaning you're repeating things, right? But you're also building, and it's kind of the idea of what is it? Is it hang gliders? That's how they go up. They kind of circle their way up. I don't know if you've ever seen a huge bird. They do that. They'll circle and go higher and higher and higher. You can do that as well. And that's what I mean by iteration. And that might seem repetitious. That might seem circular or nonlinear. Just let that happen. So don't think you can learn it all at once. Repetition is key. The third thing is retain that level of curiosity, and ways to bulwark that, as a fancy way of saying support that, is to get a mentor and is to get some sort of education system that works for you. And by education system, I mean, I suppose there are some people who just do it all self-study, and bless them for that. Other people, they really like to have an instructor because that kind of grounds them and makes them learn. But find a mode of learning that works for you.
That's a really important. Find the mode of learning that works for you, and then just stay, as you said before, stay consistent. Be patient. Amazing. Thank you so much, James. We've gone a little bit over time, but I mean, I could talk to you for a long, long time. I'm going to have the opportunity to meet you again face to face. We can continue the chat in Melbourne at CyberCon, which I really look forward to. But thank you so much for coming on. And I know that a lot of the people listening are going to get a lot of value out of it. So I really, really appreciate it.
Fantastic. And you could follow, Google James Stanger and blog. There'll be some more blogs that I'll be putting together, for example, and some things that we can do together, Adam. So keep on learning, folks.
Appreciate it. Thanks, James.
You bet, man.
Thanks for listening, everyone.